Dracula's back. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name is James and I just got out of seeing the new horror film, The Last Voyage of the Demeter. This is essentially a retelling of the classic Dracula story, except for this film is all set on the chapter of the book based on the ship the Demeter, where he's traveling from one place to London. And so I was able to see this on Thursday. I wasn't able to get my review out until now. And overall, I really enjoyed this movie. So we've been craving for some good vampire movies for a while now. The last really great vampire movie was arguably Daybreakers or Stakeland over a decade ago. And so we've been craving for it for a bit. And in the last year or so, we really started to get some with Renfield and now this movie. And so from the beginning of when I heard about this film, I was intrigued. And I always said this could be a really fun vampire film or it could be really generic. I found that the trailers were awesome. It brought back what I like about vampires, which is animalistic, vicious vampires. And so I was really excited and really interested going into this film, hoping that they would bring vampires back. So starting off with the positives, overall, I think that the atmosphere of this film is really well done. It has this great atmosphere and tone of dread and hopelessness to the point where you, along with the rest of the crew on this ship, feel like there is nowhere to go. And part of that is because of the setting, and part of that is because of how it's shot. It's very well shot. This is one of the best shot horror movies of the year. It's got a lot of really good uses of like shadows and not knowing where the monster's going to jump out of. And so you never really know anything for certain. And just the idea of being kind of stuck out on the ocean is really quite creepy. There's nowhere you can go, and there's nowhere you can go. You're in the middle of the ocean, and it uses that atmosphere to its best advantage. I've seen this film be compared to movies like Alien from 1979, and I would really agree with that. But at the same time, I'd also kind of throw out the name The Thing, John Carpenter's The Thing, where Dracula obviously isn't a shapeshifter in this film, but there's kind of a bit of uncertainty where certain characters think that other characters are doing these things, and it's not a creature, it's humans. And so that's another reason why I think this film excels, is because the characters have combating ideas of what really is going on. Talking about Dracula himself, I thought he was used really well in this film. I've seen a lot of complaints about how he wasn't shown a lot, and I actually think that's a good thing. Ever since the trailer, I said, please don't show him too much in the marketing, and luckily they didn't show too much of him. And the reason why I've always said that is I've always found that animalistic and vicious vampires and monsters should be in the shadows, and that they shouldn't be front and center all the time. They should be more scary. You don't know where they're coming from. And there's a lot of great moments that is because of that. There's one scene in particular when it's the first real scene that you get to see a good chunk and a good bit of Dracula, and it involves shadows where you turn the corner and you just see him there, and it's a really great scene. It's tension filled. From there, that helps with the camera movement and the cinematography, where it feels like we're looking at this creature and we're experiencing all these events that these crewmates are experiencing through their eyes. It's just how it's shot, where you don't always see it. You don't always see Dracula. You never know fully where he is. You can hear him, but you don't know where he is. And I thought that was really, really well done. To me, at least, it seemed like most of the Dracula effects were practical effects, and they all look really well. They all look really good. It has kind of like a more classic feeling of kind of like Nosferatu, of of his face, and I thought that was a really smart choice. And then where he's still animalistic, but he has kind of that classic look to him. And then there's lots of little twists that they give him of in the other half of the film. They reveal he has wings and he can fly. That's a cool twist, and I think the like physical performance is really well done, where it's really creepy, and it's very, very well done. And even the digital stuff, which there certainly is, I thought was pretty solid, even though you can kind of tell it's a bit digital. Another positive of this film is the characters. All of them are done really well. Corey Hawkins here is the main character, and he does a really good job. I think that he's maybe the standout. I mean, they try and give him a bit more backstory. It makes sense why he's there, and it makes sense why other characters don't trust him. They do a good job with that. Another really big standout is David Dastmalchian. He's someone that has been popping up in the last few years. He's always had these little roles, but now he's getting bigger roles, and he's someone to keep your eye on. He's really good in this film. He brings kind of an energy of he doesn't trust Corey Hawkins' character, and that adds a cool element to it. And my final positive in this film is there are certain deaths and there are certain things that happen to certain characters that I really wasn't expecting. It's very rare that you get a movie that actually surprises you, and there's certain characters that die in certain ways, and you'll understand why when you see it, that I was genuinely shocked that they showed that. And that's just me. That's just me. I was kind of surprised. And so I will always champion movies that have balls, that are willing to go where most movies won't, and kill off certain characters that most movies won't. Moving on to the negatives, the first one is there's a lot of really big plot conveniences and dumb character decisions. The first one that comes to mind is a little bit spoilerish, so I'll give you a little bit to click off for about 30 seconds, and so that's your warning. There's a certain point in the movie where they discover where Dracula sleeps and where he lives, and they just, while he's out, and instead of telling anyone or going back the next day to kill him, they just kind of forget about it, and so it feels like an extra 10 minutes of the movie that could have been cut out. It's completely pointless. And so to the point where the next big scene is them in the daylight, and the characters could easily tell them, we found where he sleeps, we found where he lives, let's go kill him. He's completely defenseless right now in the sun. And so that really bugged me. There's a couple other problems where certain characters disappear, certain characters are killed. There's very clear evidence that someone was either hurt or was killed, and they kind of just move on. Like there's the first character that is killed is they see a knife on the ground and a bit of blood, and they're like, oh, it could be you. Whatever. And then they move on to the next scene. And so like it's very clear that, and it's not until later that they start taking precautions, and that doesn't make any sense. If you know someone has gone missing, you know someone is not telling the truth, or that there's something else on board. And so that really irked me of like, why are you just kind of waving this off as if it's nothing? Like, you know something's wrong, and I always hate when horror movies do that. Ultimately, my biggest problem with the film is this feels like a part one. And, this has been a year filled with part one of twos, and I'm kind of tired of that. Fast X, Mission Impossible, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, and the only one that I thought has really absolutely nailed it was Mission Impossible, which is my favorite movie of the year. And so watching it, this film felt like the movie ended, but the story didn't end. The movie ended, but the story didn't conclude itself. So it just didn't feel right. It felt like there was something coming afterwards that just didn't help, and that needed to be there. And part of that is because they restrained themselves by just telling one chapter of the book. And to be honest with you, it's really frustrating because with the amount of money that this film cost, it cost $45 million to make, which means most likely over $100 million just to break even. And with how it's looking at the box office right now, I really doubt that we're ever going to get a follow-up to this film. And so it's a movie where watching it, I really want it to get a follow-up so we can get that continuation in this world. I like this lore. I like this version of the characters. But because of that, we know what's coming. We know that, spoiler alert, Dracula lives, and we know which characters live. And so it's really, really, really frustrating that, this is not, the story doesn't conclude itself. And so if this film is successful and it makes enough money to, maybe warrant a sequel, and maybe we can get like a part 1, part 2, where it's maybe like a Dracula's Hunt movie where they're just going after Dracula, and we can get a new version of Van Helsing maybe and a couple other iconic characters, that would be really cool. But until then, this is going to be a huge problem for me because you don't get the full story. The story doesn't conclude itself. It just ends. And so that really bugged me it's bugged me for about a day after I left the theater. But overall, guys, I still really enjoyed this movie. This is a really fun, enjoyable horror movie, and horror's been picking up a bit in the last few weeks with Talk to Me, Cobweb, and now this. So if you're a fan of vampires, horror movies like Alien or The Thing, and especially Dracula, I think you're going to enjoy this film. Just go in with modest expectations. Don't expect to love it. But I would say it's barely worth that. Go out and buy it for me. Well, that was my review of The Last Voyage of the Demeter. If you've seen this movie, please let me know what your thoughts are on it. I'd be very curious. It seems like it's a little bit divisive overall, but please let me know your thoughts on it and what other movies I should review. And until next time, I'll see you on the other side. Bye.